engineer. On today's video, we're going to get into something that's, I guess I would say that a lot of people need to consider when it comes to becoming an engineer or deciding to do this as a full-time job, or really pursue this as a full career path. Um, I guess you know obviously being as an engineer, there's a lot of things you're going to end up being involved in. Um, Now, whether or not you fully have the choices or the options to pick exactly what you want to do straight out of college, that's something a bit of a different kind of conversation, because when you first get out of college, you kind of, as I kind of stated in my last video, or I forgot which video it was, but sometimes you might take whichever job might actually get you in the one foot in the door. um but as somebody who's been in working as a engineer, varying from being a plant engineer to um a product development engineer, I kind of realized there's the ethics behind what you do as an engineer um can kind of slip past a lot of people, or exactly is what you're doing you know morally justified, or obviously this would be based off of your own moral judgment. But as an engineer, you're what you do and what you create and what you bring out to the world can make an impact on the world or your country or whatever you live in. um so just kind of rolling off of that, as just the things that I've now start to think about as I'm kind of furthering my career progression, is morality in engineering or ethics in engineering. Things you need, like I kind of look at now as, am I okay with whatever I'm involved in, right? I kind of just wrote off a couple of different questions that I'm going to kind of touch bases on, um, just to kind of get you to think about exactly what you might be involved in, or what do you want to be involved in, or what you're comfortable being involved in. And that really just leads into my first question, which is, what are you okay with having your name associated with? Now, as you learn, or you might be learning, depending on if you're in college or as a engineer now, or even if you're a high schooler, you're starting to kind of browse around different majors and careers. um, every time you develop something or you design something, your name is going to be on that drawing, or whether or not you've created something completely new, and you have a patent, your name is going to be on that patent or that document that's going to say, this is the person who's responsible for developing this product, or whatever product that's going to then be um, broadcasted or pushed out to the world. And for me, kind of realizing that, sorry, he's just playing with the toy right now. Um, I now start to consider exactly what kind of things am I okay with my name being associated with. Um, and a lot of people don't necessarily realize that like, essentially, there's always a risk when you're developing something, or whatever you decide to go down, as far as career paths, that sometimes there is a possibility for whatever you designed, or whatever you co-signed, essentially, can be used in a way that might not have been the original intentions, for yourself, or whatever design or or engineer is was involved in the creation of the idea or product. There's a lot, especially with what I do now. You know, it's always a mix of it's the end user for us, or in a lot of say people who work in the firearms industry. Um, it's always going to be up to the end user, whether or not they use the product for good or bad things. And that's something I had to personally kind of which obviously I'm not really, I'm not against having firearms. Like I absolutely believe that us as Americans should be able to carry a firearm. Um, but obviously, because my name is on whatever product it may be, um, it's a mix between whatever training people gets and how well the enforcement is as far as making sure people are safe with the product. Will really kind of dictate exactly where that fine line is for other people that are working in other defense industries, automotive, um, pharmaceuticals, or the healthcare industry. You have risks that you need to always take into consideration when it comes to you doing the particular work that you're doing. Um, for for really anything you do as an engineer, you're going to have to take you really have to take some consideration, which is why the testing process, or the thought process that goes behind the development to the testing phase, and then kind of rolling out to the market. That's what is going to really make it or break it for a lot of people, I think, to a degree. And I think it's probably more so as you get older, you kind of idolize, and you're like, oh my god, this is engineering is cool. But then once you start doing it, and then you start to kind of look at the fact that, hey, um am I going to be really proud about this? And exactly, thinking about exactly what the impact, or the impact to the world, or whatever your immediate society is actually going to have. And that kind of leads into my second question. What kind of impact do you want to have on the world or in the respective country you live in? Um, Obviously, the different paths of engineering can take you to basically many different ends of the spectrum. Um, for a lot of people who might be working in, say, things that has to do with the environment, you can always have a net benefit to what you're working on. Or if you're looking at dealing with the ecosystems and stuff like that, or healthcare, um, automotive. It could be things that people use on their in their daily lives and stuff like that. Um, you have the opportunity to really give back to the world or your country, and the impact that can last generations, essentially. Um, and for a lot of people, some people, honestly, there are going to be people who don't care whatsoever about what they do. It can be the worst thing possible that they're actually doing, and they know it's something bad, but they just don't care, and they're just like, oh, I see the dollars, or I see the net benefit for me personally. Um, there are always going to be people from different ends of I guess, the morality, um, of the society, or today's society, um, and they might not just end up caring whatsoever. But I do believe, or I would like to hope that for a lot of people who are becoming engineers, or currently working as engineers, have taken into consideration whether or not what they want to do and what the work that they end up producing ends up being a net positive overall for um, the society or the world. Um, Going into, I guess, kind of, culminates. Um, Basically, essentially, everything is going to be the ethics. Um, Obviously, once you learn, in some people, I don't know how every university kind of goes through this, but you always want to take some type of ethics class. Um, what you're doing, in my opinion, should be ethical, right? Ethical practices being done. Um, you know, the idea needs to be grounded in some type of positive ethics, right? Um, Now you learn about different practices and what you're allowed to do based off the rules and regulations of the country you live in, or for those who look at international norms and stuff like that. Um, there's typically going to be, to some degree, some type of universal code of ethics, essentially, that all companies must abide by. Um, so whether or not you realize what you're doing is ethical, or if you don't care, then obviously this isn't for you. But I always try to make sure what I'm doing is ethical to, I guess, whatever my what my beliefs are, or to what we've agreed to as a society as a whole, human population of the world. Um, these are things that I truly believe that needs to be kind of rooted in what you should be doing. And obviously now with the rapid changes of technology, there's a lot of different things coming out. There's a lot of new technology coming out, and I always kind of wonder whether or not, as much as it looks cool, um, is it really, is it ethical to be, ethical or moral, and what the use cases are for a lot of these products, or what the applicational use is. Um, Now this is something, as far as the next point, this is something that, for me, obviously, when me starting this, this YouTube, um, I've never been one to be super, super into, being photogenic and being on social media too much. Um, but I decided to do this as a kind of show my kids exactly my progression, and this is what my life is. Um, but for everybody else, the question for you guys would be, will you be proud looking back 10 years from now, with what you've done? And will your kids be proud of exactly what you've done? Now, I know for a lot of people, their kids, for really for the most majority of people, you want your kids to look up to you, right? You want your kids to be able to be like, hey, my mom or dad has done X amount of great things, or they are a, you know, perfect role model, for how I need to be, when I get to their age. Just exactly what I want to actually end up being like. Um, and obviously, when they're kids, they're very impressionable. But once they start getting older, they might be asking about different questions, what you've done for work, or if they're kind of, the kids are pretty curious and they just kind of see you doing your thing, working or whatever, and they're starting to ask you like, "What are you doing?" You don't want to be that person to have to sit there and lie and sugarcoat exactly what you've done. Um, that itself kind of shows that you have not, or you are not proud of the things you've done, especially when it comes to engineering. Like, there are so many different negative outcomes that can happen from your work as an engineer, depending on the companies you're working for. But for me, I think that's going to be one of the biggest things I um I want to be able to say, or be able to focus on when I start having kids. Is like, hey, I've done this. These are the things I've done, right? This is the benefit of I've been able to give back to to society. Um and obviously some people's like, oh yeah, I just made a really cool design. But obviously, you want to kind of look into the impacts that whatever you do as an engineer is going to have, whether it's small, whether it's micro, whether it's on a larger scale where millions, even to to the billions of people might be able to benefit from, right? You don't want to have, or at least you want to try not to be involved or be associated with things that that can really put you in at risk of kind of being in trouble for a lot for doing certain things, right? Like I said, some people, I'm sure there's a lot of people in the world who genuinely just don't care. They see something that can be made, whether or not it's going to be for good or bad, they have no care. And whether or not they even care to put the protections on their idea or their work, so that other people can't twist it and make it into something into something that can be used for bad things. Um, it's just for me, I would rather have my kids not have to question the moral foundations I'm raising them on, especially once they get up to that age. That okay, so dad, he raised me to do X, Y, and Z, but he never held himself to the same standard, right? Um, I think people are going to have to kind of realize or start to kind of really discuss, you know, the more the ethical backgrounds of what it is to be an engineer, or what does it mean to be an engineer, right? Now, obviously, advancements in technology always have came with a lot of risks, and sometimes people had to do things for the betterment or what they consider the betterment of society, um, regardless of what the negative impact might have been at that moment, but make the argument or make the case for in the end, it became a positive thing, right? So, as best as you can, might have, want to do things in the beginning, um, try to do things, you know, with due diligence from the very start. Um, Try to, eliminate the question of whether or not this is ethical, whether this is moral for you to be doing. And I guess, this brings a little bit to the last question, which was, how do you decide um, what to do as an engineer? For me, you know, growing up, I was always, breaking things growing up, like, right? First laptop my mom ever bought me, I tore that whole thing apart. Tore the whole thing apart, but put it back together until I was able to memorize exactly how the entire layout for my laptop was able to um, be placed, or how did they construct this, right? My dog snoring. Sorry about that. Um, you know, RC cars, all these different things. I was always into just basically destroying things, essentially. Breaking things apart, seeing I could put it back together. If not, whatever. But most of the times, I was able to put things back together. I was also interested in, architecture, drawing. I drew a lot as a kid. Um, but then I kind of started shaping exactly what did I want to do, or you know, what did I want to do when I grow up. Essentially, I bounced around a couple of different ideas of like my exact outcome as a or an adult, right? I came to the more so the interest. Okay, I'm gonna work in the automotive. Um, I want to work in automotive. Or I want to work in or aerospace essentially. Now obviously, a lot of competition for a lot of those. Um, but now kind of a little bit different. Now I still have time to whether or not I want to go back or do something else. But for right now, where I'm at, I'm I'm content with where I'm at. I love who I work for and what I do. Um, but kind of shifting through those things, I realized that um, after a while, like trying to go down certain routes, mentally it started kind of bugging me on like, okay, is this am I going to be okay with exactly like my name goes on that one drawing, or I have my name and I get registered for a patent for that one thing, or a complete new system, and then you realize who's going to be using it in the end, right? Who is this going to be used? Who is going to be used for, or who is this going to benefit? And obviously, you're going to learn um, that sometimes when it comes to depending on which companies you work for, you might design something, but you don't own that patent, or you might be like the company might own the patent, but it might say, these are the engineers who did the work, right? Um, but in retrospect, most of the times when you're working for these companies, whatever designs you do, the company owns it, right? And what the company does with that design, you have no say in it. Um, so for me, coming down to it, it's like stay within your interest, right? Stay within the interest you want to, you have. Um, but consider like, hey, this one company might not be ideally what I want to do, or excuse me, the company's dealings might not be exactly what I want to be involved in, but it gets me to, where I want to be at. And honestly, I think since obviously the individual person and their preferences, you're gonna have to kind of figure out exactly who do you want to work for, whether or not you can indicate whether or not the company itself is a good company to essentially work for. Um, that's gonna be really something you have to gauge on your own. I can sit here and tell you from my own personal beliefs and my own perspectives on life and so forth that hey, this company might not be the best company for you, right? Because of whatever things they're involved in. But that's going to be up to you. And sometimes, which sucks, we don't live in a perfect world, but sometimes we're going to have to end up dealing with the repercussions of it. So you always end up finding, work for a company that you're comfortable with what they do. Like I said, for me, firearms, it's a big I believe in the right to carry and the right to own firearms. It's just I have to then be comfortable with the end goal of hey, just because my intentions behind doing the work that I do doesn't mean the person at the end that's going to be buying or receiving said parts are going to actually put them to the best use cases, which obviously you can see all over the world today when it comes to firearms and stuff like that, especially dealing with gun violence. And as much as I would love to just solve the issue of gun violence and dealing with that I have no direct no input on exactly what people can and cannot do because I don't make the laws. But we obviously, as the company, abide by the laws when it comes to the regulations. So for you, you're gonna have to be okay with designing something that might have the capacity to go ahead and be used outside of the intentions, which obviously firearms. There's personal protection, home protection, law enforcement. Whether it's military, whatever. There's only but so many use cases for firearms, right? But um, but for everything else, where you have the technology you might designed can be adapted for different things. You know what I'm saying? Like that's sometimes you're gonna have to really kind of either be like, hey, I'm okay with this, or you avoid those industries as much as it might suck. You have to sit there and really kind of sit there and weigh out your options. Um, the company, like I said, the companies can do whatever they want with a lot of with the designs you end up doing for them. And like I said, sometimes your name might be on that design. So whatever you do in some companies can immediately fall back directly on you. Like, hey, why did you do this? But obviously, it's like, okay, The company's the one who made the decision to go ahead and sell it, right? And I know some companies even can be a bit more even flexible with that, where they might even give you, give you your own little cut or portion of designing something. Um, but still, that moral responsibility or accountability is still going to fall on you, right? Because you allowed or you willingly designed something for, the company. Um, Now, don't let that hold you back in the sense of trying to better yourself and become a better engineer. Sometimes you're going to have these are the things that you have to be okay with, because a lot of people don't discuss the ethics and the morals behind like the real life scenarios that could possibly happen with the products you design. Um, in the way we're you know rapidly advancing through with technology throughout the world right now, you're always going to be having that question, or it's always going to be those debates on, is this ethical to use, is this moral to use. um so I believe it's really up to you guys and to kind of really weigh out the options. Like, can I handle like having a repercussion for this, or can this, will this bother me, right? And if you're one of those people who are just completely cold-hearted, that's a different thing. um but for those who actually care about the work they produce, this is just a heads up on exactly what you might, or what you should probably take into account, right? um and obviously there's different other, other types of or forms of engineering you can go into where you might not be as, um you might not be on the forefront of innovation. You might be in like a more of a background position as far as when it comes to engineering. You're not directly responsible for any of the designs that get done, but this is just an overall of, you know how do you decide what you want to do as an engineer, and whether or not it's it has the best ethics surrounding it, right? um and I believe on that note, you know feel free to go ahead and, like I said, or I keep saying this in in every video, but like, comment, subscribe. um I'll keep cranking out, try to crank out some more videos for you guys. Schedule, got my, my little secondary job, just to pick up some extra money. Trying to working out that schedule now. So um, let me know what you guys think. Let me know if there's any other questions also, or any questions in general about engineering or in today's world. What particular questions, or really, particular questions you might have about, college, current world events, or to, obviously keep, when it comes to those questions, keep it to where I can actually respond to it. Um, you know, Asking me what my future plans might be, some stuff I might be able to, let you guys know about. You know, just I want to make this as interactive for you guys as possible. Um, Feel free. I can try to be open book as much as possible, and kind of keep you guys on the inside. You'll probably see another video be dropping tomorrow, maybe. This one, you'll see it when it gets uploaded. But from the time this gets uploaded, the next one should be the day afterwards, or if anything happens, it'll be when when I'm able to upload it. But I'll get you guys in the next one. Doses.